Time for sound design. Today I'm back with a video where I create a sample instrument, and today I'm going to use Chopin's Nocturne, and I'm going to cut out a piano note from this classical piece of music. So the version that I used starts with a single piano note and right at the beginning, and that's the only note I'm going to take from Chopin. And I'm going to put this into Ableton's sampler and create a piano instrument from that one single note. Of course, I'm also going to do some sound design to this one note, use some effects, assign some macros to create my version of this piano instrument. Without further ado, let's go to Ableton and I'll play you the original and I'll show you which note I took. I will link in the description to the version of the Chopin piece of music that I have sampled. Let me play you a little bit of this. So as you can hear, the piece starts with a single note and it's right here at the beginning and it's very clean. So it's this one. And if you look at the tuner, it's an A sharp. And that is the note I'm gonna use for today. So let's zoom in a little bit. Let's make this 4 bars. I'm gonna drag the audio sample into the sampler instrument and adjust the start and end points. So somewhere here I will crop the sample. So I'll make a bit of adjustments. I put the release time on 1 second instead of 10 seconds. So this is basically the piano note. It's an A sharp. The root note is now on C3, so we have to adjust that so that it actually matches the keyboard. So I'm gonna put this on A sharp 3. So now when I hit a C on my keyboard, you actually hear a C. As you can see, it's a bit off, so I'm gonna detune it a little bit. Give me -9. Now that we have it tuned in sampler, we can play this as a piano. But one thing I would like to do is to basically add a sustain pedal to this, or like a sustain mode. And I'm going to do that by looping. So I'm going to turn on the sustain mode forward, backward, and then I'm going to adjust the start and end points of the loop towards the end of the sample, not completely the end because it's silent or it's too low the volume. So maybe something like this. Which means now you can hold down a chord and it will just sustain forever. Of course, it's not perfect. You can kind of hear the looping point, but that's okay. Especially because the next thing I want to do is to add a reverb to this, just a basic reverb of Ableton, and increase the decay a bit. But the cool thing is if we now, for instance, play one note and use the freeze functionality to freeze the reverb. And now lower on the keyboard, I can play on top of this. So I basically have now a drone. Let me turn the freeze off. So I think this is kind of cool that with the reverb you can basically create a loop and use it as a background bed and then play on top of that to kind of create different kind of textures. So the next thing I want to do is make actually a macro of this freeze button and maybe also the dry wet of the reverb so that you can turn off the reverb completely and just play it dry. So in order to assign macros, I'm gonna group the reverb, the tuner and the sampler into a instrument rack. And now we have the possibility to assign macros. So I'm gonna do map and then use the freeze and map it to the first macro. Freeze on off. And then the second macro will be the dry wet of the reverb. So now we can play with the dry wet of the reverb completely open. And then also freeze that. And then play on top of this. And then turn off the freeze with the macro. One thing I'm thinking with a piano, there's always like a very sharp attack, and now we have the possibility to actually soften that attack, especially in combination with the freeze and the kind of drony sounds. Maybe it's nice to have a softer attack. So let's create another macro where we use the ADSR attack of the sampler. So under filter global, the attack. Map this to the third macro. Rename it to attack, and let's see here, attack volume envelope. It goes from 0 to 20 seconds. That's a lot. Let's put it to 2 seconds. That's maybe still too much. Let's put it on 1 second. So we're adjusting the range of the macro. So now we can go from 0 to 1 second. I'm gonna turn off the reverb for now. So 1 second is still quite long, but so that's kind of cool. We can adjust the attack. Then there's one thing I would like to do, especially for the drone kind of frozen reverb sound. It's nice if there's a bit more stereo spread. I'm thinking some kind of panning, and then also assign a parameter or two to the macros from the instrument rack. So I'm thinking the auto pan, put it after the reverb. Let's see how that sounds. So that's cool. Let's assign parameters. So the amount of the auto pan, and also the rate. So that's the speed. So let's rename it to panning amount and panning rate. It's always good to name your macros so you actually know what they are about. So if you look at the macro mapping here on the left, panning rate is from, the panning amount is from 0 to 100%. That's cool. Panning rate is from 0.05 to 90. So maybe go to 5 Hertz. That's more than enough. So if you put it max, that's fast enough. So we want it probably somewhere around half a Hertz. All right, so now we have the option to sustain by looping the sample. We have the freeze on off, the reverb dry wet. We can change the attack of the sound, and we have panning. So now we have a few different parameters that we can play with to turn this one simple single piano note into kind of a textural ambient piano. So I will play around a bit more to demo what we can create, what kind of sounds we can create with this instrument. So let's start by freezing a note. Oh. Put it a bit lower in the mix. So now we have the dry wet of the reverb as sort of a mix control for the volume of the frozen sound. Let's add some attack to the sound. There's a little bit of a click in the sample, so with a bit of attack you get rid of that. You can actually just hold the chords and it will just sustain like this. That's cool. And if you're done with the drone, you can just turn it off. So yeah, this is a lot of fun to play with. Because of the freeze functionality, I'm thinking one way to actually make this useful is not to put MIDI in the sampler clip, but just to have a different audio channel, record the output and just experiment with this and make a long recording and then see what's in that recording that is useful. So let's do that. So I have an audio channel here. I'm going to put the input to channel 2. Let's record. So this was a bit unstructured, but still, if you would, also do it through a metronome or having a beat underneath, so there's some kind of grid to play to. But still, this could lead to interesting results because you're basically experimenting with this. Yeah, I can imagine that you end up with a long recording and there's a little parts are like jams, so you can take that out and you can basically sample, use it as a sample. So you basically sample yourself and it's based on a sample. So that's kind of cool. So the next thing to do is to save this instrument rack with the macros assigned to my library of sounds. So next time I want to create a track and I want a piano, then I have this instrument with the Chopin sample in it ready to go with my macros assigned, so I can create a drone or any kind of textual piano. If you're interested in using sample instruments, I have 2 libraries over on Gumroad. They're free to download, so go check them out. They're for Ableton Live. As always, thanks for watching, keep making music, and see you in the next one.